Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning. Okay, I know it's the end of the year, and I appreciate y'all taking your time out of your day and time away from your classroom to come look at what I have to present you today. But I really think that when you see what we're about to dive into, that you'll be able to implement this into your current literacy circles and centers that you're doing in your room. So, Michelle, what are you currently implementing in your room? How do you do your literacy stations? Or do you even do literacy stations?
Yes, I do. I have the teacher station, work on writing, word work, and read to self, and listening to reading.
Okay. And do you change your teacher stations based on skill, or do you focus on a certain TEK, or how do you design what you're going to do at your teacher station?
It varies throughout the year.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the unit we're working on. Sometimes it's by specific TEKs. So it just depends on the student's needs.
And we know you do have poetry in your TEK, so, and especially with testing and the STAR testing, it's important that we get the poetry TEKs covered. All right, and Kristen, how do you do your literacy circles?
Almost the exact same way.
Okay.
But I also will focus on the diphthongs and the blends if needed. And then when I see a child that needs to be pulled in and work on specific areas, then I will pull them in.
Okay, and so I know third grade's kind of a transition because in third grade we're testing on the TEKs that go with poetry, whereas maybe kinder first, second, they're exposed to poems, but they really don't understand the depth and the complexity of the poems. Okay, so what I'm going to show y'all today is something that I think would really be beneficial, and this is when you're focusing on your poetry unit. You're going to get your poetry TEKs covered, but you don't just have to do this at a specific time of the year. It can be ongoing. So the way that I see these poetry folders being created is the teacher will create them, introduce them to the group at the teacher table, and then slowly release them and be able to put these at a station where the kids know what they're expected to do, and then they do it by themselves. So go ahead and open your folders, and you'll see that what I have here is I just have two simple examples. One is on the primary level and one is on the intermediate level. Because so if your kids are coming to you into third grade, they're going to be exposed to poems, but they might not know that it's called a poem. They might think of it as a nursery rhyme, where nursery rhymes are actually indeed a form of poetry. So almost any kindergartner, first grader, you can go and you can sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And they know what it is, but they might not understand the meaning or what constitutes it as a poem. So that's my first example that I have in your folders for you is Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And then we're going to kind of look at the components of poetry and then how this can be implemented based on what TEK it is that you're trying to cover. And then I have an intermediate poem posted in here also, and we're going to kind of do the same thing with that. So the first thing that you're going to have to be able to identify is what specific type of poetry are you trying to work on? So no matter what level your kids are on, I would go ahead and I would start them off with simple poetry. So we could all, maybe even as a whole group, as a class, go ahead and recite and sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. So the kids are going to, sing it probably the way that they sing it as a nursery rhyme. And then you're going to say, all right, well, what do you notice about that poem? So then on my anchor chart, I could go ahead and I could list all of the responses that the kids noticed. So what do you think that a student would say when you're singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat? What do you think is something that they are going to notice?
The rhyme.
Rhyming, right? I mean, and that's something that we work on starting in pre-K. So they're going to be like, okay, well, what words are rhyming? So we might list stream and dream.
Right.
And then what I would do is I would encourage them to go ahead and say, okay, so yes, stream and dream rhyme. But now let's look a little bit deeper at the skill. What is making that long E sound? Well, right here we have our vowel pair, E-A. So we're going to go ahead and on our anchor chart, we're going to have the rhyming words, and then we're going to have the sound, our long vowel sound. We can continue to come up with other words that would rhyme or other words that would have that spelling. So taking row, row, row your boat. And do this as a group to kind of get them all introduced, okay? We're going to list our anchor chart, all of our different things. And then what I would encourage them to do is to see how many words in a word workstation they can come up with using the Valtine EA. And you can go ahead and have them work in partners. Make sure that you have your letter tiles out. That way they can manipulate the words. Encourage them to go ahead and to use the blends that you've already taught in your phonics. And even if you're doing this at intermediate level, I would go ahead and do it. They might enjoy getting the hands-on and some of the tactile stuff that they don't usually get anymore. And make it a competition, maybe at the older level. You know, okay, here guys, this group of 4 is going to work and see how many words they can come up. This group of 4 is going to work and see how many words they can come up. Come back together as a whole group, list them, and let that aha moment, oh yeah, I didn't think about that one, take place. As an extension for your high achievers, I would go ahead and have them try to actually write a poem that models this format. Okay, and then they could share that. If they even have extra time, by all means, let them get on a computer, use word processing, add graphics. You know, it's limitless there. Okay, but that's going to kind of get them introduced to what they're going to be doing. As the year progresses, you'll say, all right, you're going to get your poetry folders. That might be at a poetry station. And you can have a visual of what they're going to do. You're going to do your make words based on, for example, in Row, Row, Row Your Boat, we would be working with EA. And those are the letter tiles that you're really focusing on using. Then you could have your mirror station where you're going to mirror the form of the poem. Okay, and in their journal, perhaps, they could try to write a poem that mirrors the format. And then when you come back to your teacher station, you can really focus on rhyme, rhythm, lines, free verse, stanza, whatever skill it is that you're focused on. So that's why I have that example in there, is to just show you no matter what level, you can start off with that. And now you're saying, okay, so what poems am I supposed to incorporate? So I provided you with a list. If you can look through your folders and you'll find a list. This is your resource list. So, you know, I'm presenting this to you for you to be able to take it and make it yours. Make it what works for you in your classroom. You might already have a resource of poems that you like. Maybe you focus on Shel Silverstein or something to that nature. But here are some sources in case you can't come up with a list of poems. And then also I encourage you to go to the library. I'm sure the librarian will help you come up with a list. But this is another fun one you can do down here is you can, make a Wordle with your poetry words. And that might be a nice extension to use also. This resource right here for Poetry for Kids, it's a great one. Ken Nesbitt has a variety of funny and wacky poems. So if you're really trying to get your kids interested in poetry, that's probably a better buy-in than divulging into the deep philosophical meaning poems. So that's a good resource to go to.
And I've used this fizzy, funny, fuzzy because it has audio. And it has so they can listen to it.
That's great. Yeah. So you could implement that even at your listening station.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
It's very good.
I like that. And that way also, if you've got an ELL learner or somebody below level, they're not having to, they're not struggling to read it. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. So how are we going to assess the kids' knowledge? Okay. In a station, sometimes it's difficult because you're not right there monitoring them. So that's why we're going to keep everything in this folder. And then we have a couple of different things that we can do. At the primary level, if you're really working on a certain skill, such as their sight word, I've included a sight word progress summary in your folder for you. And so what I would encourage you to do, of course, you're never going to want to just give the kid a poem without explaining it and letting them have some practice with it. So after they've seen it, after they've been exposed to it, then you could call them up into your small group and have them read it to you. And then right here you can just track if they're getting their sight words correct or if they're not. And hopefully what you'll be able to see over time is like on the linear graph, you'll be able to see their progress. And of course we want it to increase, not decrease.
Right.
Okay. But that's more at the primary level. Of course, we always want to check for comprehension. But something else that you can do is you can create a rubric, or if you're not comfortable with creating rubrics, I've included one in your folder, and it's going to help you track if the student is understanding the meaning. Now, poetry sometimes is difficult, as we know, because it's kind of up to interpretation of the reader. But we do need to try to teach them to look for meaning or the author's purpose, what they're trying to address.
Right.
So on here, there are certain things that you can look for, such as, is the reader understanding the context? Okay. Are they monitoring and correcting their own reading? So as you're having them read the poem, are they going back and making their own corrections and checking for meaning? Fluency and phrasing. We know when you read poetry, you want to make sure that you're breaking at the correct spots and pausing at the correct spots, breaking between your stanzas, pausing after your commas at the end of the line. So that's something that you can assess for here. And, I would also encourage you to see if they can make text to world or text to self relationships. Even on Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Okay, have you ever been in a stream? Have you ever rowed a boat? Because how many kids have ever actually rowed?
Right.
Yes, we live in the hill country. Maybe they've been in the river and gone kayaking.
Right.
But we're talking about rowing.
Right.
So those are things that they'd be interesting to see. Okay, life is but a dream. What does that mean? That's so open-ended. What does that mean to you? What is your dream in life? So these are all things that you can assess through poetry. Okay, so what is the kid going to do with this poem? So we talked about the fact that you can focus on a specific skill, and you can focus on your word work by making words based on what phonics skill you're working on. But how are they going to show you that they understand poetry? What do you think would be a way to assess if the student understands poetry?
Illustration.
They could. They could definitely illustrate what they see going on, especially at the primary level.
Right.
I mean, we want them to write sentences, but
Right.
let's get something out of
And
them.
at the intermediate level, we can have like a reader response type page.
Perfect.
For them to respond to.
Excellent. And then the teacher could just go back and just look and just make sure, if we're doing Row, Row, Row Your Boat and they write about fishing, okay, we're on a stream, but
Getting there.
Let's see, and you
Yeah.
can dig further through that. That's great. Okay, so what I want for y'all to do is I want for you to think about your units that you do, about your teaks that you use, about what is required from you, and then how would you go about implementing a poetry folder in your classroom? What would be the first thing that you would need to do? Gather your
Thought. Well,
materials.
yeah, the materials.
Right.
And I think finding the best poem that fits with the teaks and that's at the level of each student. That's not above their level, but that's not below their level, that meets the level of each student.
Okay, so that's great. And then something else, that hasn't been touched on, but is we always want to integrate our curriculum.
Yes.
So in science, if you're talking about the water cycle,
Absolutely.
let's look for a poem that has something to do with the water cycle.
Yes.
And then that way you're hitting on more than one thing. They don't know it.
Right.
So you could go back to this list of resources. You could go to your librarian at school. You could go to the community library, find some poems. I like the fact that you said on their level. So let's talk about differentiated instruction for a little bit. Even within the classroom, could you have different poems in different people's folders.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, and I think as long as not everybody has to be reading, you know, you don't have to find one for every child, I don't think. That way they don't realize that they're on a different level. They're just, everybody's, you know, oh, I've got a different poem.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's okay.
Yep, I love that. Great job. Okay, so if I was using these poems, so I've gathered my poems, maybe I've connected cross-curricular, I have different levels. How would you encourage your students to practice reading the poem? Are they going to read it to themselves? Are they going to use whisper phones? Would they read it to a partner?
I like partner reading. And I think if I'm going to do the different levels, maybe partnering the ones that have the different poems, encouraging that so everybody can hear the different poems.
I like that. That's great.
And so that way, again, they have no idea why they've got a different poem.
Right.
But then they're like, oh, here, that you can hear my poem and I can hear yours. And that way we all hear the different poems. And so you know your kids in your class, and you can always say, okay, you go with this one because I know that you will encourage and help if this one struggles with a word or whatever. And most kids do. You know, most kids help them along, not get annoyed or.
So as far as monitoring their fluency, it would be interesting to have a rough read, a dry read of the poem on Monday when you present them with a new poem. And, you know, if you establish your good classroom climate and you partner them up accordingly, the kids can actually do running records on each other without feeling intimidated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
So, for example, Michelle, if it was a Monday and this is a brand new poem, okay, class, go ahead and get out your poetry folders. You're going to go meet up with your reading partner somewhere in the room, and you are going to do a fluency running record for your partner. Okay, so they're going to partner up. They're going to get knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder, make sure that they're using a whisper voice as to not distract. It's going to be a completely comfortable classroom environment, and your students will have another copy of the poem. Okay, so each partner will have a copy. So Michelle would do a dry read. She would pick up her folder. She would read it to me. I, as her reading partner, would take the fluency. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and turn that in so that the teacher can view it and know what's going on. But then on Friday, Michelle's going to read it to the teacher. And we're going to compare. Did she make progress with that fluency reading? Are we increasing? So that's the way that we can incorporate fluency with poetry. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and see if we're going to turn you loose to create your own poetry folders to implement in your classroom. What I want for you to think about is I want for you to think about your first 6 weeks. I mean, hey, here we are ending the year. Why not get started on next year?
Right.
Okay, so think about your first 6 weeks. Think about what topics you have. Think about if you know of a poem that you could go ahead and use. Maybe you want to Google it, find it, you know, and let's work with that. If you can't come up with something, we'll just pretend I've provided you with some extra poems. You can pick one of these, okay? And I want for you to take some time and design some stations based on your poetry folder. Okay, design, here's the poem that I'm going to use. What listening station, how would I incorporate this into a listening station, since you both already do listening stations? How could I incorporate this into a fluency station? What about a word workstation? And something to show comprehension, whether it be illustrate, like you said, or reflection, like you said. So let's just take a couple of minutes. If you can't find a poem that you like using one of your resources or one of these here, feel free to use one of these extra ones. Go ahead and paste it down, jot some few notes, and we'll regroup and kind of come up with what you think. Here's some scissors and some tape and some snacks to keep you motivated. I'm going to do one too, just for fun. I'm going to pull up my favorite that I've used before that I don't have on here. Do you find this tedious? Do you find this helpful? Do you see implementing this?
Very helpful.
Good.
Yes. I was thinking about using the running record and having, creating some sort of running record list or something inside for each of the kids if they, if that worked, so they could have, everybody has the copy of the other one's poem, and then they could have their running record in here and do that as the other one's reading their, and so then they've got their,
they have their
They
data.
can
they have their
and
data,
they can see it themselves.
and they can see it themselves, and they can see their progress, and because kids respond, I think, to data, and especially, if you present it in a positive way, even with the miscues that they make, if they see that
They're
it's all
improving
right,
over time.
the next time you read, you're going to get better. And that's what it's all about. So you'll read next time and you'll get better. And so they see that, all right.
They see their success.
Exactly. And so it can also become their data folder as well.
Like that. And then that's something that you could even share with parents at conferences.
Yes. Yes. And especially if you have a struggling reader or an ELO or, and that I think would be really helpful. And so, whether you use this kind of folder or a folder with a pocket or anything like that, I think it could be really helpful. So,
Thank you for sharing.
You bet.
Did you pick a poem, Michelle, that you want to tell us about and how you could implement it in your room?
So being at the beginning of the year and, trying to get to know your class a little more and stuff, I just went with a simple one about dogs and animals and their funny names and to kind of engage them, and because most everybody has a pet or has had a pet or something, so they can kind of relate to it.
Nice.
And it throws a little humor in it by naming your cat dog and
Nice.
and so kind of gets them thinking. And so one of my stations would be like to reflect on that. Have you had an animal? What was its name? Was it a funny name? Illustrate your animal. If you didn't have one, what would your pet
Nice.
be, or what would you name that pet?
And I like that you're building that classroom community too, so
Yes.
people can make those connections.
Because you always have that child that says, I've never had a pet.
Yes.
They want to know.
Right. They just don't want to do it.
Exactly.
I've
Yes.
never had a pet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then you say, okay, what have you, if you would.
If you
Yes.
would, what would it be, and what would you name it?
Right.
Describe
That's
it
good.
for
I like
me.
that.
Even if it's a velociraptor.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a dinosaur.
And
What is
Kristen,
it?
were you able to find a poem and kind of get started? I know I didn't give y'all much time.
That's
but I
okay.
just-
I actually had the same one because I think it could be used on any level because it is a humorous. It's Ken Nesbitt, and that's one of the resources that you gave us. And so it being so, funny, I think kids would respond to it well, whether I read it out loud to them, because I think a lot of them, might have trouble with it at first. I think they would really respond to it. And then, whether we illustrated it at first or then we used it as rhyme and introduced rhyme at first, because it was, cat and then dog and then mouse and then frog. And so used, we could introduce rhyme right
Excellent.
away.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you one of my favorites to do, and I think you can do this at any level. Let's see if I can get it to pull back up. So this is Sick by Shel Silverstein.
Nice.
So, it might not be, or it could be, the first day of school when the kids have the anxiety and they don't want to go to school, and they can
Nice.
pull this one. I cannot go to school today. And the way I would probably do this is I would read it to the class so
Right.
that they could hear it and have it modeled. Said little piggy Ann McKay, I have the measles and the mumps, a gash and a rash and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry, I'm going blind in my right eye. And try to make it dramatic to get
Right.
them into it. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. And there's one more. That's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. Especially during flu season, right? You can
Right.
That's a great one, yeah, during our flu season.
I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure my left leg is broke. My hip hurts when I move my chin. My belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched. My ankle's sprained. My appendix pains me each time it rains. And of course it continues to go on. But what I could do from there is one of our basic skills is parts of speech.
Oh, nice.
Even at kindergarten, we're introducing nouns. So what I would do then is in a station, I would say, okay, guys, today we're working on parts of speech. We're going to go through, we're going to start with our basics, our nouns and our verbs. And I would challenge them. And perhaps based on the level, okay, I want y'all to try to find 3 nouns.
Right.
I want you to try to find 5 nouns, okay? And then I could also incorporate singular and plural so that they're finding the difference between the singular word and the plural word. And of course, I might have already worked on my suffix s or es. And then in my word workstation, I'm going to have, that's what I'm looking for. That's my goal. I'm looking for plurals.
And this could be a pre-assessment
Absolutely.
of how many nouns or what, if they know what nouns are and if they know what verbs are and that sort of thing. And a good way to introduce the whole lesson because
Absolutely.
it's comical and it's fun and it's light
Mm-hmm.
and that's good. I like that.
So I encourage you for a takeaway from here to start your year off with poetry folders. 1 poem a week, I think, would be sufficient.
Yeah.
Because think about it, then you're going to have, 36 weeks
Right.
worth of poems. You're going to have 36 poems that you have exposed them to. You can focus on different types of poems. You can focus on the skill. You can use them however you see fit best for you in your classroom. But I would like to come and check back with you, 3 weeks in. Hey, are you using your poetry folders?
Yeah.
How's it going? And then maybe we can meet and bounce some ideas off of each other about what's working, what's not working, how to make it better. Get a poll of the kids. Do y'all enjoy using your poetry folders? And just kind of see how it goes. You're welcome. Thank y'all for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.